Welcome to When We Die Talks. I'm your host, Zach Ancell. In this podcast, we explore different beliefs about what happens when we die and how those ideas shape the way we live. Thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you're here. This episode is brought to you by The Dead Book. Okay, let's get real for a second. How prepared are your parents, your siblings, your partner, or even you for the future? We're not talking about the fun stuff, but the hard stuff, end-of-life planning. It's a tough conversation, but that's why The Dead Book exists. The Dead Book makes it easy to plan ahead, even if you think you don't have the time, money, or assets. It's affordable, straightforward, and designed to give you and your loved ones peace of mind. They've made it their mission to help others avoid the chaos and stress that comes with being unprepared. Visit thedeadbook.co and get started today. And just for listening, use the code WWDT at checkout for 15% off. Today's episode features Elizabeth Twardy, a new friend I had the pleasure of connecting with through a mutual friend of the podcast, Anna, who was our guest in episode 2. Elizabeth has an incredible story shaped by her experience with death and loss, particularly surrounding her father's battle with cancer. In our conversation, Elizabeth reflects on the profound moments she shared with her father during his illness and the impacts of his passing on her life and family. She speaks candidly about the complexities of grief, the signs we look for from our loved ones after they're gone, and the ways we can honor their memory. Through her journey, Elizabeth offers a raw and honest perspective on navigating grief and the ways it can shape our understanding of life. Her reflections on love, loss, and the enduring connections we maintain serve as a reminder of the profound impact that those we have lost can have on our lives. Join us as we explore the intersection of grief, memory, and resilience in this deeply moving conversation. I hope you enjoy. Well, thank you for coming in. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
It's been a couple months since we met up. Our friend of the podcast, Anna, introduced us, and then she had you reach out and kind of pose why you should be on the podcast. So you're the first person who filled out the little questionnaire.
I don't think I knew that. Oh,
yeah,
that's
you were.
Awesome.
Yeah, so thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
So we met up, had coffee, and chatted a little bit about death, and I loved your story and excited to chat a little bit more about it today.
Well, thank you. I'm excited too. I like to talk about death.
Who doesn't?
I don't know.
Well, yeah, so I think we can jump right on into it, and
Okay.
You can just start telling us what your relationship with death is.
Well, in the fall of 2016, my baby shower actually, I found out my father had cancer. And so, that's kind of a strange thing when you're like about to have a child who was born in January and then dealing with my father's illness. And so for the first 2+ years of Lulu's life, my daughter, my dad went through 11 surgeries and chemo and radiation. And, he went through it all, like lost all of his hair and became very, very thin and just all the things. And then here we were like shifting back in, and it was always like on and off, like, is it going to happen? Is it not? And I was flying back and forth with Lulu a lot to the East Coast where my family lives, thinking we're here. Fast forward, he was here in July of 2019. He would come out and spend time with us, see his granddaughter. And then in August, I flew to the East Coast to see my family. I saw my dad, and then he and his partner, Luda, who was from the Ukraine, hopped on a plane, and they went to Kyiv for 6 weeks. And then my father came back right before my birthday, and we spoke on a Friday because my birthday, which is November 1st, was a Sunday. And I always remember the sequence, the days, the timeline. And he wasn't feeling very well, and he thought he maybe picked up the flu. And he didn't even call on my birthday. He texted me, which was unusual, but, he was 70s and traveled a bunch, and sure, we can pick up a bug somewhere. And then all of a sudden, a few days later, I was getting on a red eye and flying to the East Coast. And within 7 days, everything in his body shut down. It was really, really violent and awful. And then he passed away on that 7th day, which was very unexpected. And I was holding his hand when he died, and I felt him take his last breath. And I think about it all the time. And I don't know, it made me, having that happen, witnessing that somebody love so much is just, if you haven't been through it, there's not any way people can understand, and then you're always in that place beforehand of like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened, which doesn't even equate to what it actually is, because it's something that's like of another world, I think.
Yeah, I haven't necessarily had that experience with a parent, thankfully so far, but I was in the room when my grandpa passed, and I was with him, and it's actually funny, his birthday, it would have been his 90th birthday 2 days ago.
Happy birthday.
And I was with him for like the last 2 weeks. And yeah, that experience it's something different.
It is. Because when my grandmother passed away, I had been out there just a few weeks beforehand. And this was well over 10 years ago. I was living in Chicago still. And she was in home care hospice at that point. And so we knew it was going to happen. And I felt like she was waiting like for all of us to be there. And I was with her the night before she passed away. I slept in the room with her because you would have to give, it was like kind of painkillers, but you dab them on their lips to make them comfortable. And then I got up that morning and I was going to take a shower, and she passed when I was showering, which I was really angry because I really wanted to be there, but I was like, needed to take a shower.
Yeah.
And so that was a little bit different. It was very sad, but I feel like we were more prepared. My mom and my uncle were there, and my siblings and partners and all of that, and cousins. And it was different. We understood where it was. It's like you can prepare a little more, even though it's still death and it's very sad. And I understand now, like my mother's relationship with like when her parents passed, because I could never fully grasp that. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah, it's impossible to.
It is. And how people respond. Some people get very angry. Some people get very withdrawn. I was just in shock, I think, for months after my dad passed. Like it was November 19th. So it was right before the holidays. And at that time, Lulu was just going to be 3. And I had never been away from them at that point. And I still had to like be a mother and come back and create joy and do the holidays and make sure that. And so when I look back, even looking at photos, I can't remember. There's just this time that isn't there. And even with Lulu's birthday, like I'm just kind of, sometimes I have to sit and really think about that particular year, because it was just, I blanked out.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
There's so much going on.
There is. And I was the last one that ever spoke to my father before they intubated him. And, his oxygen levels were just crazy. Like he kept needing more and more oxygen. And finally they're like, we have to intubate him. And I was here in Portland and my dad was in Virginia in a hospital. And so I spoke to him. So that conversation rings in my ear a lot, or my head. I don't know. And I've always wondered maybe how my siblings felt about that, because I don't ever know. I've never asked if that's difficult, being that I was the last one, or if they wish that they had spoken to him. And then flying out there, I had a dream. I was like on a flight with a college soccer team. So there are all these college soccer players.
Classic dream.
No, this was in real life. But I was like on the plane, and there are all these soccer players on the plane. Yeah, I know, classic dream. It's just my normal dreams. And it was funny because I was sitting on the aisle seat, and I was next to 2 players, and I was very upset. But it was like a feeling I'd never really had before. I didn't understand it. It's like something that sits on your chest, and it's like the worst anxiety you've ever had, or it's like you can't breathe. So I was like, I have to try to close my eyes. I have to try to get some sleep. I know that I'm going into something that's going to be very intense, but I need to rest. And I had a dream that my dad told me. He was like, you know, as well as like, I know that I'm not going to live. And so you need to make sure that you can take care of things and help your siblings and make decisions if they can't, or, and I was like, I guess maybe crying in my sleep. And this nice young person next to me just grabbed my hand and like held my hand. We never even spoke words to one another. And when we got off the plane, it was really sweet. He just kind of looked at me and was like, nodded, like, I hope you're okay. So that meant a lot to me, whoever you are there.
Maybe there'll be a listener.
Maybe. It was awful. Like I feel really grateful to have been able to be with him. But my father was a very strong man, physically and mentally. And he was an adventurer and a storyteller. So to watch somebody's body deteriorate that quickly and then their brain, you're just kind of like, it felt extremely unfair, especially because he had worked so hard to fight cancer for like his grandchildren. So that part is always it still is hard because, you just want them to be here, to be able to see them.
Yeah.
And I see so much of him in Lulu. So hopefully he does too, wherever that is. I don't know. And then the night that we made the decision to take him off support completely, I was sitting in a chair right by him and we had put on his favorite music and just tried to create a space and, that we're here and we're with you. And I had fallen asleep. I was dozing because those hospital chairs are not comfortable, but I was so tired because the amount of sleep we were getting was none. And it was strange too, because with my siblings and I, we were sharing a room together for 7 full days as 3 adults. And we had not done that, I don't think, since we were children. And with like the amount of like emotions and like, we're just like lack of sleep. And
I don't think that's something you wish on your worst enemy.
No. And my sister and I were sharing a bed and my brother had the other bed. It was just like the whole experience. And like the place that you stay is very sad. You're on like different, it's like every floor is a sad floor, in these like essentially hospital hotels. But,
and then the hospital's way worse.
Oh,
it's so depressing.
It is. It's so sad. And I'm very happy with like his team. Like he, his oncologist was working with him because they were just like, we don't know. This is wild. What is happening?
Yeah. Was he in remission?
Well,
I know that's always like a funny term with cancer.
It is like,
because nobody really wants to say it unless it's like, they're very certain.
Had thought that there were so many conversations, like maybe it's metastasized into something that we didn't see. Maybe the stent, because the cancer was in his leg. That's where it initiated. And he had so many surgeries to the point where most of his leg in that area had been removed which I had never seen until he had visited in that July. And it was very unsettling.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But he was such a stubborn man too. And like had to see his granddaughter, had to get on a plane, even though he should never probably been flying most of those times through those surgeries, but he did it. And you could see the pain that he was in. You could tell, but he never really would like let on too much. And then they thought maybe the stent had been infected, but it was just like how aggressive it was. It was like it, shut his kidneys down, shut his liver down. And then whatever this thing was, like ate through heart valves.
Whoa.
Like I watched a video of it. And
it's intense.
And then his brain.
Yeah.
And so at that point, you can keep somebody on support, but it just would have been such a disservice to him. He never, that's not living. And so that night I was there and I dozed and he again came to me and he said, it's time. And I opened my eyes and they walked in because they turn off all the monitors because it just makes it so stressful. So that part too is very strange. I remember like that happening and I was grateful in that moment because they said sometimes it can take days.
That's how my grandpa was.
Which is awful.
Took a while. And there was definitely some moments of like gasping for air that really made not that it didn't make me uncomfortable, but that it really stressed out like my mom and other family members. So yeah.
It is very stressful. And when they were going to take the tube out of him, my siblings were like, we can't be in here. And I said, well, I think one of us needs to be with him because I don't want him to be alone. So I stayed in there when they took. So I was a little bit more prepared, I think, because knowing in that moment that the tube was coming out because we were taking off all of that support, maybe I felt a little more prepared, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah. As prepared as for something like that as you can be.
Yeah. And that's the strangest part too, because you feel their presence, even if they're not able to communicate with you on a this level.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden there was nothing. It was gone.
Yeah. And
it was just the most unsettling feeling like I have ever had in my life because that energy was just not there anymore. And so then, the hospital goes through the thing and they send someone in and blah, blah, blah. And then this one part that always sticks out too is afterwards, I remember standing in the parking lot and it was like nearly 5 a.m. with my siblings, and the three of us just all stood in a circle and just stared at each other. And like, I don't think I've ever felt physically that way before. Like my body could hardly, I felt like I was being pulled like into the earth. Like it didn't feel like I was in a real place. Like if you're like on a boat and you get off like a big boat and it's just like, that's how it felt.
Interesting.
And and then after that, it was kind of like, okay, well, we have to do these things and get this done. And
which is also crazy, just how quickly things.
It's like, it was very rapid fire, and we had to move, clean his house out, and had planned on having a memorial for him in that following spring, but then COVID happened. And so we didn't, which I felt for me, like, I think maybe I felt this more than my siblings, but I really felt like I needed to have that. I needed some kind of closure for me. I don't know what I thought it would do, but I just needed some kind of something. Maybe it's like I was raised fairly traditional, like in a Catholic church. And so it all just was like, but then I have had years now to kind of.
Have you not?
No, because we were going to, and then my brother got sick. My brother had stage 3 cancer, almost diagnosed 6 months after my dad passed. And then I was sick. And then my dad's sister's husband died, my uncle. And then we all thought, well, we'll have like something. And now we're like, why don't we just have a celebration? We can all get together. We can all see one another, because it's hard living so far away. And my father was just, he loved food, and he loved to laugh, and he loved music, and just have like a fun thing. I mean, sure, there'd be some tears, I suspect, but at least we'd be in a space where I feel like we'd be celebrating him, because that's what he would want.
I was going to say, I feel like, and of course it's just my opinion, but like, I feel like that's the best way to do it. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want people's lives to be worse when I'm gone. Like I know it'll affect people, or hopefully, but like I want people to celebrate my life, not, I don't know. I think that's something very interesting that is really hard, especially in our culture, is grief, and how to navigate that. And so I think, I don't really know if that plays a part in it, a celebration of life versus a funeral or whatever, but trying to set up people to not have as much grief, because it is a really horrible thing. It is.
And it's like, there's not any like definition of how you're supposed to, like what path you're supposed to follow, and I still think about him every day, and there'll be signs sometimes in days, and sometimes I don't have any, or I'll just out of nowhere cry because I'll think of something, or I wish I could call him. But it's strange, because even now I have 2 voicemails on my phone. The last 2 are from him. Yeah. And I've not been able to listen to them.
Oh, wow.
I can't. And maybe I will one day, but I know that's where I'm in my process. I can hear his voice in my head still. So that's good. I feel like when I can't hear it, or when I think I've forgotten, maybe I'll listen to them. And it's not like I haven't heard his voice. Like there's a video of he and Lulu, but a lot of the time I turn it down really fast, because I heard it very early on, and it really was triggering. And I was like,
I'm sure.
And Lulu was laughing, and it was just the sweetest thing.
A lot of emotions.
Yeah, too many, but they're still there. And I even, like my phone, I have my favorites, your emergency. My dad is still there. That number's not even working, but it's still there, because I'm like, and I know that made sense strange to some people, or be like that, whatever, but that's just like how like he's still kind of with me, I guess, so to speak. But
absolutely.
Yeah, it was awful. And, people that had lost parents, that the first one that said it to me, she's like, I'm sorry, you're part of this really terrible club now, and it really is. It's terrible. It's like, because it's just forever. Grief is just with you. And it's kind of like a little piece of your heart just was taken, and you'll still grow and love more and all these things, but that little piece, I read something the other day. I was talking about a stone, carrying a stone in your pocket, and it's so heavy. And then as time goes by, it becomes lighter and lighter, but you're still carrying that stone with you. So you're a little off-centered. And that feels kind of how it is.
Yeah.
But I just try to honor him in every way that I can. And his birthday just passed on August 2nd. And I always post things about him. And I said, I just want to laugh until I cry. I want to dance every day. I want to eat 1,000 oysters in my life, like him.
Yeah.
And that's what I want for my life. I want to be able to like honor him now in that way. I think I'm past a lot of because I was like angry and then I didn't like it. I really want to accept it. And then but now I'm like, okay, I want to live my life in maybe a way too that he wished he had more, because he was imperfect. He made a lot of mistakes and things like this and hurt people. And you know what I mean? We're humans. And so I try to just like think about that a lot and think about my choices, because I asked him like in the July before he passed, when he came to visit, did he have any regrets? And he just said, I waited too long for certain things. And that always like replays in my mind.
It's hard.
Right? It is, because everyone's afraid. And then we're like, well, what are we afraid of?
Yeah. We're not making it out of this.
Change.
I keep on hearing that a lot. It's like, not making it out of this game. So
no,
what are you going to do?
That door is there.
Yeah.
For some of us, maybe it's a little more open. I don't know.
Yeah. None of us
Who
know.
knows? But yeah.
Yeah. So I think maybe that's a good, there's been a couple points where I've been like, you kind of been teetering into the second question. So maybe it's time to talk about, what do you think happens when we die?
Oh, it's such a hard question, right? It's like really big question. It's the question. Well, after my dad passed, I was walking with Lulu. It was like after the new year. And I remember everything. I remember the smell of everything. So it was kind of that springy.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was Polish, Jaju, grandfather. And out of nowhere, this little tiny 3-year-old looks at a tree and goes, "Hi, Jaju," and just walked up and hugged the tree. And I just burst into tears. And I said, "Where's Jaju?" Jaju's everywhere, in the trees, in the grass, in the air. And I just was kind of like, I couldn't breathe almost.
You had to get like some goosebumps too. I mean, I got a little bit of goosebumps there.
It just like, and I'm like, okay, you're 3. That's like the most profound thing. I had never thought of that.
We know our next guest.
I know. Lou will talk a lot about death. And so just matter of fact sometimes, but also very spiritually. And it's kind of amazing.
That's amazing.
But then I thought about it and I'm like, maybe that is true. That idea that like this, that we're created from stardust, and maybe that we do go back into everything, or maybe that when you lose someone and you're just out in the world and you just get the sense of them, like a familiar smell or a laugh, or even sometimes you think you see them, or you'll see someone so similar. Maybe that's that universe. Maybe that's pieces of them sprinkled. Maybe that's their essence, their spirit, their soul. I don't know. It's so hard because I don't believe that this is it. I just can't. I guess I'm just unwilling to accept that that is what it is, because it doesn't make any sense. Like we're these like beings that are mostly energy. And knowing what I know of how it shifted so much when he passed, he went somewhere.
Yeah.
And even for people like my sister, who I feel like maybe isn't as into the things that I'm into, more of the witchier things, I suppose, but recently was saying I haven't felt him in a long time. And I hadn't either until my kiddo went on a first trip without myself or Joe, and with grandparents and cousins, went to Minnesota this summer. And I was having a really hard time with it and just trying to be like, okay, this is going to be great. It's so wonderful for Lou, and it's going to be great for me. And I was kind of pacing in my backyard. And my dad loved mourning doves. We always kind of had a thing. We talk about them. And one showed up kind of shortly after he passed and would just visit me every day when I did dishes. And I felt like it was him. And I hadn't seen one in such a long time. And then just in that moment, one just appeared like on the fence. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks, Dad. Like I needed like a sign, like I'm okay. And I know it sounds strange. So maybe.
None of it sounds strange. I mean,
I guess good. Maybe. I'm glad, because sometimes.
Maybe to some people, but I think the thing is everybody has their own beliefs on this, and so it's how can we call one more strange than another? Because we don't know.
No, we don't know. And I hope that that's what it is. I hope that we go back into everything. I mean, since Lou was little, Lou's talked about their other life and would talk to me about my other lives and that we knew each other. And maybe that's part of it too. You know, maybe there's just pieces of us in others, or we get reborn again, or I don't know. You know, my neighbors have this dog and his name is Teddy, which coincidentally is my brother's name. And he's a year old. And I can almost promise he has human eyes. Like when I look at this dog, I think that we have met in like another space or plane. And I'm like, maybe that all ties into it. I don't know. Like, but I have to believe, and I want to believe, and I choose to believe that it's so much bigger than we are. You know, I think of him sometimes on this like astral plane, just like hanging out with the Moody Blues and drinking scotch and like just
eating oysters
and laughing. And because then what is it all for? Like, because then it doesn't really make any sense at all. It's like we're just here for this like teeny tiny amount of time on this like continuing, I don't even know. Maybe none of it's real.
Yeah.
I guess we'll
see.
Who's
supposed to say it is real,
or
is it real? Or
I'll send signs back when I'm not here, hopefully, and maybe try to leave. I mean, I think that if also we're more in tune too, maybe we feel it differently, you know?
Yeah.
Sense things. And, you know, it was just kind of like I knew that he wasn't I knew it. I knew in the moment when I spoke to him, that was the last time I'd ever speak to him. But I couldn't bring myself to say that out loud. But I knew that he was going to die. And so I think maybe those types of messages are everywhere, and maybe they're always sending us signs or letting us know. I think we just need to be like listening better.
Yeah, paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
I think that's awesome. Now, the third question. What would you want to tell people you'd be leaving behind if you were to die tomorrow?
That's so hard. Wow.
And I've said it a couple of times on here, and I do need to come up with new phrasing or something, but I think a lot gets left unsaid is kind of the way that I've been positioning it. And so, you know, we don't know when it's going to happen. And I think maybe if we lived our lives a little bit more that way and not knowing, it would change the things that we fight over. You know, because some things are important to fight over, but I think there's a lot of things that we fight over that are important. And the stuff that we stress about and all this, there's so much that we put effort into that ultimately, if we were going to die tomorrow, doesn't matter. And that maybe it would be more worthwhile to say, I love you, or, you know, or whatever.
I think I was reading this article actually just last night, and it was talking about children, how like the number one thing for them having anxiety when they're young, developing it, is rushing, is feeling like you're always like you're not on time. Like they were talking about, these two child psychologists were talking about mornings, particularly rushing. And I thought about that. And I thought about the last few years of school and the days that we did and how that just made everything really, really hard, and not knowing, right, as a parent, we're trying not to obviously screw our kids up. We inevitably will in some way, shape, or form, but just hopefully they'll know that we are their safe person to come back to. That's my goal. And I thought about that, and I thought, okay, and for some reason that ties into that. It's just like, slow down, because we didn't get that chance to have that last moment together. I didn't get to tell you I loved you. I try to do that more than I ever have before. And not everybody's there with that, you know, like I want to tell everyone I love them all the time. But sometimes people are like, okay. And that's not about me. I know that. But I think I would want them to just know that all the people I love have always been a piece of me. And, you know, that I've carried them with me always. And I hope that they can remember joy and happiness and love each other. And that's such a big question.
It's a hard one.
I hope we were in a place where if there was any turmoil that we had healed, because that would be awful, you know, to die and not have said things or have been angry with someone, or because that's the thing. It's like we die, like not we, but when you die, like it's the people left that have to like figure out how to carry on with your life and with that loss. And I would want you to, I guess, go back to the thing. I want you to laugh till you cry, dance every day, eat 1,000 oysters or whatever it is, love each other, and slow down, enjoy like moments, because there's so many things that we overlook every single day. And I was walking here and I realized I had gone the wrong way. So it took me a little longer.
Or maybe you went the right way.
I did go there. And I sent a text to a friend of mine and I just said, hey, I hope you get outside for a walk today because it's beautiful. And so maybe those things, that when I die, when you go for a walk, you think of me in a way that makes you smile or makes your heart laugh. Or it's different too having a child.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so that is so hard.
Yeah.
I guess I would say maybe it sounds so cliche almost, but that you'll carry part of me with you forever, to know that my love for you will always be there. It will never change, even if I'm not physically here. So I guess.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I need a tissue, everybody.
It's a little confusing. But yeah, I appreciate your vulnerability and willing to share. I know it's hard, but...
That is hard. That was harder, really. Talking about that part, I feel like I talk about my dad a lot. And so some days hit me different, but talking about my child. Whew.
Yeah. The inverse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But yeah, just we need to be better about loving one another, even if we're angry at that person, because we may not have them tomorrow. I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope not.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
I know.
But
Ooh.
yeah,
that would be a bummer.
It would be.
I would be pretty pissed at the universe if that was my path, which I don't believe so. I feel like I'm going to be here for a long time. Yeah. At least I better be.
Yeah.
I hope all of us are, for this podcast, most importantly.
Yes, of course, the podcast. Well, yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story. It was amazing. And I think this might be a perfect time to plug your company, your business. Mm-hmm. I love the name, and it has a little cool story behind it. So.
It does. It's called Peyote Sunday. And 2019, when my dad visited, I asked him a question of what's one thing you could ever do again? And he said, peyote in the desert. It was a Sunday. And I just was like, and my very dear friend, Tracy Talley, was there and looked at me and said, Peyote Sunday. And I said, Peyote Sunday. I had no idea what that meant at the time. And I bought the domain name, and
because that's the first thing you have to do once you come up with a name. It's go get that domain.
Right? I mean, seriously, you have to. Yeah, I kind of sat with it for a while, and I love vintage and I love clothing and I love styling. And I just kind of started in that space of, vintage clothing. And, I did some pop-ups, hosted them. It's been this really like work in progress of like trying to figure out like my next step, because I worked in hospitality for a very long time and I thought that I loved it. I think for a time I absolutely did. But I wanted to do something, I don't know, it brings me joy. And so it's kind of ever evolving. I have like not just children's, but now adults and jewelry and things in a store, which is really exciting. And I'm really trying to build it, but it's a memorial, I guess. It's my memorial, the memorial maybe this is what it is, to my dad, because I named it after him. And then I was very fortunate to 2 summers ago go to Joshua Tree and be in that desert and understand like what he was talking about. And so I kind of just am letting it evolve naturally, and it feels really good. I'm building out an office/studio in my basement right now, and I'm really excited. I'm feeling really creative, and you can find me on Instagram, and you should follow me.
And it's just Peyote Sunday.
Just Peyote Sunday.
Awesome. And then where's the store?
So right now I have pieces at Flutter on Mississippi.
So yeah, if you're in Portland, come check that out.
Yeah. It's also the best store in Portland, in my opinion. Maybe I'm biased, but yeah. And I'm excited. And it's, there's my dad. It's a little piece of it, and it's pretty awesome. So.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of When We Die Talks. I hope today's conversation sparked some thoughts and helped you feel a little more at ease with the idea of death. Remember, this journey is all about exploring our beliefs and fears together, so I'd love to hear from you. Call our voicemail at 971-328-0864 and share what you think happens when we die. Your thoughts might just be featured on a future episode and could help others on their own journey. Until next time, have a good life.